Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
Jackson, what's up, man?
Oh, same shit, different day, you know. During COVID, that's more true than ever.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, I know. That's what it feels like every day.
Thanks for coming in, buddy.
Thanks for having me. I'll call up anytime. I really enjoy this.
Well, it means a lot, and I will tell you, a lot to cover here, a lot of stuff I want to ask you about. But as we do on this show, it seems to be a reoccurring theme. How are you maneuvering the pandemic?
Much better than it was.
Be honest now.
Yeah,
I think people are starting to actually say that on a reflex.
Yeah.
Because,
well, I don't want to be the guy that's complaining about something that everyone else is going through. But when this first happened, it was like this introspective thing where everyone just felt like shit, you know? And I still have my days, but I try to look at the bright side of it, you know, and try to find how can I improve anything through this, you know? Because it's given me a lot of downtime to think about just myself as a person when I can't hide behind a guitar, which is the first time in my entire life I haven't been able to do that, especially since being an adult. I mean, it's been 14 years. I'm 28 now.
Yep.
2,000 shows. I mean,
you're so old.
Yeah. Super old, yeah. But 50% of your life, regardless of what you're doing.
It feels like, 14 years, you know, playing music.
It's the only thing I've ever done.
Yeah, right.
And it's the only thing I understand. So I've built my whole life around that. And for that to, not to scale anyone's problems, but I mean, I think this has had the biggest effect on the entertainment industry, the live entertainment industry. So that it's really weird.
What's that going to look like when we finally come out of this?
I don't know. I think people in my position are going to be at an advantage because, you know, Eric Church and Keith Urban can't go play gigs for probably longer than I won't be able to. You know, we're doing 200 to 1,000 person venues, and those places are going to be allowed to open if they're still there by the time we get through this. You know, God forbid. But I think I'll be in a good position because we won't have to compete with people that, you know, it always sucked for years. I never understood it. You know, you'd play a show at Rinky Dinks and sell it out one night, and then 6 months later you play it again, and 10 people would show up. Well, you know, Kenny Chesney was playing in Pittsburgh, and
that's the story of Pittsburgh. Though.
Yeah, you know, well, and I get it. You know, he only comes once a year. I get it, but it is frustrating.
It's a big event, though, man. That's like, you know, when he comes to town. I think that's the stadium, right?
Heinz Field, and he usually sells it out, and you know. I enjoy going to those shows. I really like it, but it sucks because, one, I never have time to go to those shows because I'm always playing, and two, when I have to compete with that, it really sucks, you know. And it happens. You know, I've toured all over the country, and you know, it happens in every city we go to. You know, there's places where it's not as bad. Because there's just more people in general that want to see music. Pittsburgh's probably the worst, but it does happen everywhere you go. If you end up in a city where some big dude's coming into town, you know, chances are it's going to affect your position.
What is Pittsburgh's thing about live music, though? And before I let you answer this, I'm going to put a prerequisite on it. Okay, I know for a fact Pittsburgh is a fucking hard town to get over on live music. This is the town that, for better or worse, so I'll say it so you don't have to. It's basically the town that they will think nothing of paying $7 to $10 for some kind of crazy mixed drink with a bunch of alcohol in it.
But they'll bitch about a cover charge.
They won't even pay a $5 cover charge. They will, but they'll bitch about it. Or it's and again, I don't think it comes out of any place mean-spirited. I think it comes out of some kind of habitual habit. I don't understand that.
I don't think people know, first of all, that the cover charge usually goes to the band, or at least most of it. That's part of the problem. That's definitely an effect. You know, I've made it very clear to people that when we play, there's a cover charge, so that is going to our pay. We play for the cover a lot.
So the fan knows that.
Yeah, so they know. You know, I tell every venue we play for a cover to put a sign up that says cover charge goes to band.
That's smart.
That way, because a lot of people just assume that the bar is just raking in the cash for them,
Of
and
course,
then we're
right,
getting
everybody's
screwed,
millionaires.
which to some extent that is still true. But, that's part of it. I think the other part of it is they might have just wanted to go to that bar and they weren't seeking out that band specifically.
Okay. That's what you're kind of hoping for, right? That's how you gain a new audience.
Yes, yeah.
One
We
of the
charge
ways.
expensive cover charges just because I've found that that's not only helped us financially, but it's also helped that argument. People, they come to the bar, $10 cover charge, Jackson Gardner's playing. Okay. Well, then generally only people that wanted to come see me come to that bar. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it affected our crowds at first when I first started saying no less than $10 for a cover charge.
Right on.
But after probably 4 years, it came to the point where I realized we were ending up with venues full of our fans, and then they would bring people.
Right.
And then you get the people that say, okay, well, this band's charging $10. They must be worth something. Because you're devaluing yourself if you're charging $3 or $5. That's what I tell everybody I mentor. Like, think about it. If you can't charge $10, you probably shouldn't be playing for a cover. Mm-hmm. Just talk to the bar about giving you a guarantee of $400 or $500 or whatever it is to start. That goes back to what we've talked before,
Right.
about how I took every gig that I could for 5 years from 17 to 22.
Right.
So it kind of relates to that devaluing yourself based on what you're,
No question.
So that's kind of how I thought about it, and it's worked out.
But also, it's a method to exude confidence in your band and your product, right? Even if you question it, once you make the commitment to do it, now you got to live up to it. Now you got to really go out there, and the onus is on you to prove
Exactly.
in this town you're worth that amount of money, which is still not a lot of fucking money.
No, it's
just
not. It's not, especially for people who, just speaking from my band, they're all more talented than I am. They're all incredibly talented, and it helps us all, one, push to have quality every night and play the best that we can and rehearse and make sure our set list is the way that it needs to be, the production, the lighting, everything.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm devaluing them. I mean, we've spent our whole lives building this craft.
Yeah.
What is $10 to somebody? And in
2020.
In 2020,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to Moe's and buying a burrito for that, and I love burritos, but I'm just as likely to spend $10 on a good band as I am a burrito.
That's my whole point. Like, Pittsburghers think nothing of dropping money on some crazy mixed drink, on some top end beer or some craft beer, whatever that craze is now. So I'm just saying we think nothing of doing that, but musicians who take the time out, load the gear up, unload the gear up, set it up, play, take it down, drive it home. We can't give them $10 a head. Something's wrong, man.
I think there's also an education in the value of art here. I don't...
In the town.
Art just isn't as important in this part of the world, unfortunately.
It's Steeler country, pal.
I know, right? Yeah. And I love sports. Like, I'm a sports maniac, but
I understand.
There's huge value in supporting artists,
No
whether
question.
they be local or not, so.
Well, I think this town does. I don't want to slag the town completely. They have supported their local folks.
Yeah.
The Poverty Neck Hillbillies had a hell of a run here in 2000s.
It seems more rare here than others, though.
That's the point. There's not enough of it.
It's a little, and I don't want to. I love this place. I do. I love playing here, and it's. I'm glad it's as difficult as it is because it's made me work harder. It's made me earn the trust of people. But it is strange when we will go to Atlanta, or we were in Louisville last year, and it's a whole different thing. I mean, it's crazy. Columbus. We went to Columbus last year and played Tequila Cowboy, and the place was packed, just completely packed, and it's bigger than our Tequila Cowboy by probably 25%.
Wow.
And it was completely packed, and everybody, we play mostly original stuff. I mean, we'll throw in Seeger, CCR, shit like that, and some of our favorite obscure songs, but most of it is stuff that I wrote.
Right.
And we were playing a part of the set where I was playing songs that hadn't even been recorded yet, and bless these people's hearts, they were pretending to sing along. and they were into it. In Pittsburgh, I bust out a song.
They're all going to the John.
They're all going to the bathroom, you know. There's a lot of great memes in COVID where they say, you know, public is hiring local bands to show up and play original music to deter them from having public gatherings.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah, Pittsburgh's a strange animal like that. No matter where I traveled for business through the course of my life, the nightlife has always been different. Always, and just more engaging. And the rock and roll crowds have always been more engaging. I mean, if a big band comes to Pittsburgh and the show is at the Civic Arena or was it the PPG Plaza, you expected to see a rowdy crowd.
Yeah.
But if you had a marginal act there in terms of current popularity, not marginal talent-wise, but if you had like a band that was on the downslide of their career, that band could still go to Cleveland and pack it in. But there's a chance they come to Pittsburgh, it's a half house. It's really a fickle audience. Not crowd, but an audience, I think, in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I look at it this way. It's hard to be a prophet in your own town. You know, it's just, that is just, I don't care where you come from or where you play, you're always probably going to have more response outside of that. Now, when I've opened for big acts in Pittsburgh, it's really cool because then they go, hey, you know, you're a hometown boy, you know, and they love that. But
Absolutely.
When you're headlining your own gig, it's almost like, why, you know, why? I just don't, I can't, I've never understood it.
Don't try to spend any more time on it, my friend. It's a mystery of the mind.
That's right.
Just leave it at that. So you started playing music early. Am I right? Like, so you learned guitar before you were 14 because by the time you were 14, you were actually performing in front of people.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it was weird, and we didn't really talk about this before. I actually played multiple different instruments when I was young. I played fiddle first, and then I played trumpet, and I always had a guitar. And I would noodle, but I had no freaking idea what I was doing. But I had an understanding of music theory, and I was always obsessed with songs. I was always obsessed with different artists, and I'd go through different phases. And it was almost like I was hearing something that I knew my friends weren't, and it was very strange. And then at 12, 13 years old, I became really obsessed with all of the different types of music that I grew up with from each of my grandfathers and each of my parents. And I grew up in a divorced family, so it was almost like I had two completely different musical climates that I would bounce between.
Absolutely.
And then I just remember listening to Love, Pain, and the Whole Crazy Thing from Keith Urban, and listening to Exile on Main Street, Sticky Fingers, and listening to Larry Sparks, bluegrass stuff, and something clicked in me at about 13 years old, 12 and a half, 13 years old, when I started really noodling on the guitar. And I think it was 13 when I walked into my brother's room and said, I think I'm going to teach myself to do this. And he said, there's no way you're going to do that. And, you know.
It's all the motivation you needed.
Yep, and I kept him up all night, every night, you know, playing the same song over and over again. And that's kind of, but then by 14, I was gigging and getting paid to gig.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then it was the only job I had until I was 23 or 24.
Wow.
And then I started to be better at time management. I didn't have to practice as much. You know, I had other contracts. I could charge a decent amount of money to where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I could work on other things that I was interested in. And that's kind of when I started being more of an entrepreneur. But yeah, it was weird because for that amount of time, about 8 years, it was all I did. After school, I'd get home 3:30, and I'd play till the parents said, hey, everyone's trying to sleep, you know, and usually that was 10, 11 o'clock at night, so 7 to 8 hours a day I'd play till my hands bled, you know, and sing and write and do whatever I felt like practicing that day, I did. And if I couldn't come up with something that was inspiring to me, I'd do scales or just go through the songs that I knew. And that's still to this day how I do it. You know, I might pick up and just noodle. I might go through different theory things, or
it's a beautiful instrument.
Yeah,
it's endless.
It's still the hardest thing that I do. Still, and that's why I love seeing kids do it, and that's why I always encourage it. Is guitar will challenge you your entire life, because you're always going to feel inadequate. There's always going to be, you know, every guitar player that's ever played for me has always been better than me, and even though I play a lot of the lead stuff in the band, that's always pushed me. So I've always made sure that there's a ton of sharks on stage, that I know are going to kick my ass every night regardless.
When you were young, what was the first guitar?
Samick acoustic. Yeah,
Samick acoustic.
it was a bitch to play.
They probably fought you all the time.
Constantly. Yeah, it made my hands really strong though. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. Acoustic in general is great to start on because of finger strings, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it is also too. I love the singer-songwriter stuff. So it was always I knew that if I could figure out how to play acoustic well, that one, electric would be easier. I knew I wanted to do that, and I immediately got a telly like as soon as I possibly could. But the thing about acoustic was my favorite artists, the ones that were the best, could always sit on a stage with a guitar, no lights, no frills, no bullshit, and could still move a crowd of any size. And I thought, I have to figure that out. I have to figure out how to be a good enough guitar player to not just be strumming chords, but to be able to play the thing well and sing well and write songs that are good and be able to do that first well. And then if you can build a band around that and do that well, then it's going to be exponentially better.
Did you know early on that you wanted a band environment, though, as opposed to being truly a solo artist?
Yeah, I freaking love rock and roll, man. I love it.
I knew there was a reason I invited you here, man.
I love it. I mean, and that's been the hardest part about COVID, because I have had the opportunity to go play small acoustic gigs, and I love them. I do. And there's a part of me that really likes the catharticism and the intimacy of that, but there is nothing like plugging into my Vox until my ears hurt. And I have the best drummer in the world who's been a friend of mine for 20 years. My bass player has been a mentor of mine for years, and he's a freaking monster. Pat Phillips is the bass player, and I have a couple different guitar players. Pat's brother Jeff plays for us a lot, and he's also been a huge mentor of mine. And Eris Paul, who's one of the most pronounced blues players in Pittsburgh, plays for me as well. And I love the way he plays slide. I can't play slide for shit, so I always want a slide player in the band, and then I'll play the other lead stuff, So, yeah, and we're all really good friends, and we're all very different, but we all get it, and there's no egos. You get together and you just play.
That's rare.
Yeah, and we've never had any disagreements that have caused stress, too much, and we work really well together. And then I can't explain to anybody how rewarding it is to strap in, even just rehearsing and finding that pocket together, and then you take it out and you put it in front of a crowd, and it's the most powerful drug there is.
There's no question, and it's hard to, like you mentioned, articulate how special that moment is.
Yeah.
And they're moments, right? They're always moments.
Yep.
And you might have some obscure gig that the gig doesn't stand out for any other particular reason, but you remember that one moment you looked over and you just felt different.
Yeah. I remember the first time that really happened for me. And it was so revolutionary because I grew up just being a misunderstood, nerdy kid that didn't fit in. I had really
Waynesburg, right?
Yeah, Waynesburg. Yeah, and I was bullied, but I had really tough friends that took care of that for me, so I never really had to worry about it. And I also just never gave a shit what anyone thought. But it is weird being that age and really not understanding where your place is. And music was always something that I ran to, but it's still, I didn't have people that I played with, for the longest time.
Got it.
But I did find a way to communicate with people that I probably would have never communicated with verbally through music.
Right.
But then when you get a band together, and you all, not only you're playing music together, which is a great way to connect with somebody, but also you like the same types of music, you have the same attention for detail, and then just playing live is so exhilarating.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
My biggest piece of advice is get a band together for anybody that wants to do this. Practice, but don't stay in your mom's garage. You have to go play live and suck, and do it with your friends, because one, that's the quickest way you'll get better, and that's also the quickest way that most people that do this, I think, felt the way that I did as a kid. And then you have this circle, and then it just compounds. Would
you also agree, too, though, one of the benefits of getting out and playing live, too, is you're going to get the most honest and best and harsh, at times, feedback that you possibly could imagine. And it's good to get used to that early, and utilize the feedback, right? I mean, you want to take it to heart, and I don't mean take it to heart to destroy you, but take it as valid because these are people that are probably at some point in time are going to be paying to see your music.
Yeah, you have to take it with a grain of salt because your understanding of it is different than the people that are listening.
Correct.
But there is still a lot of value in that, and it's probably at least 50% of the value, which is a huge chunk of it, right?
Okay.
So, you don't have to go full spec to what they're saying, but I think you have to. That's been the hardest thing for me, being a neurotic person, is being able to listen to people's criticisms of what I do, but not getting off course of what my vision is. And how do you balance between the two of those things? Because it's one thing if my bass player or my drummer gives me a piece of advice because they're in it, but it's different if Joe Schmo at the bar comes up and says you need to play more of this stuff. It's, well, maybe Joe isn't my audience, or maybe he is, and I need to play things in a different. Or maybe there's a song in my set that he likes, but I played it last, and I should have played it first for him to understand where I was going with
That's got to be hard though, because what is subjective to one individual's opinion, and what actually may still be subjective to one individual's opinion, but then you hear it and you go, "Oh, that makes sense." How do you? I mean, that's got to be tough.
Yeah,
to determine that.
It'll keep me up at night. Still does, and you just have to know when to turn it off.
Did you get better at the skill of deciphering that?
Yeah, I was doing really well before COVID.
Okay.
COVID is
we don't know what's gonna be like coming out of it, right?
Yeah, well, I think everyone's having an identity crisis because what you do every day, whether you identify as a steelworker or a musician or a pipeliner or whatever it is, that becomes part of your identity. And then when you're just out of nowhere, the rug is ripped out from under you and you're not doing it anymore, it just completely screws with that. And you have to go, what the hell is going on? And then you really have to figure out who you are as a person without that thing that you had as almost like a safety blanket.
Got it. Yeah, I got it.
And that's been the hardest part for me because I'm still talking to my advisors and fans and people about what we're doing and trying to develop. That's what I've been trying to do with this time is develop a plan, more of a plan, because I've been running so fast constantly for so many years, just trying to find the next opportunity and do the best.
Did you need a time to slow it down? Like, I'm not saying COVID's positive, but it's here. You didn't cause it, so you had to react to it like all of us did. That time that you were allotted and still being allotted, it was your job, I would imagine, as an entertainer, to try to find constructive ways to use that, number one. But for you personally, did it help to be able to finally slow down? Did you get anything out of it by taking a breath and looking at yourself introspectively, or looking at your career introspectively? Have you seen any value in being able to stop and slow down?
Yeah, it took me a while, though. I was poor me for a while, and I was actually really disappointed in myself that I went to that, because I try to avoid that at all costs, because everybody's got shit and everyone's got problems, and I think that just taking responsibility for whatever situation you're in, whether it's your fault or not, is probably the most important thing in the world. I don't care who caused it. It is your job to fix it at this point, because when this all started happening, we had a record deal offer. We were working on an investment deal, which we're still working on, but all that stuff went away. So the first month was really weird. I really enjoyed it for the first 3 weeks. The fourth week was terrible, and then the following month was almost like, I can't believe I didn't end up single and on the street, because I was such an asshole. That's
honest, though.
Yeah, well then, because anytime I felt like that, I could always say, doesn't matter, go play, and then people were going to tell me I was a badass, or I was at least going to be able to tell myself that I was a badass.
Absolutely, 100%.
And now I had to go, all right, there's something wrong here. And then when I realized that I had like insufficiencies that I had been avoiding for so long, I started to work on those things. And then I also realized what I was good at as a person that I didn't realize, things that I had learned in little things that I just messed around with, like day trading and just the learning business and learning social media marketing. And I looked at all of these different skills that I had built over the years and started to go, and this was the positive side of COVID. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but
No,
just
it's fine.
kind of taking all those positive things that I found and try to build a plan around that and say, well, I've kind of been just throwing spaghetti against a wall, and I've gotten really lucky, and I've also developed a lot of skills, but I've never figured out how to deploy those all in the best way possible until now. And I don't know how that's going to work out, but I think that's been the positive for me is I would have never slowed down. I would have never slowed down. I would have never stopped, no matter how jaded or how pissed off I got or how many times I failed. I would just keep going. And not that I'm not keeping going, but I would have never taken a break from playing live. I would have never taken a break from writing or taken a break from the creative side of this to look at all of the other things that are important to its success.
What are you going to come out of COVID doing differently with your music than you went into?
Creatively?
Have you identified anything?
Creatively or from the business side?
Let's talk creatively. If anything, maybe not.
I don't know. That side, I haven't thought about it a lot because my process has been my process for a while, and I've over the past 2 or 3 years after being in a publishing deal and then really getting back into being an artist, I've found things that really work for me creatively.
Okay.
From a guitar standpoint, I'm definitely going to practice more. Yeah.
There's some honesty.
Well,
that can't hurt you any.
No, I mean, I've played 2-3 days a week for 14 years.
Right.
I didn't need to practice. But my guitar playing wasn't progressing in a theoretical way or as a lead player, and I wasn't really learning how things worked as much.
You felt that before COVID?
Yeah.
Or is it really apparent now?
I felt it before COVID, but as I sat down to play with myself against things like John Mayer and the Allman Brothers and stuff where I would just jam over it, I really realized, like...
Well, Dickie Betts is a badass.
Yeah.
No one expects you to play toe-with-toe with him.
Well, I mean, just under... these people that I've admired, it's like, I've been doing this for 14 years, and I really still feel like an idiot when I compare them, and not to say that I was.
But you're also doing lead vocals as well too. You're the vocalist, so I get it. Is it a one or the other? Is it be an exceptional lead player and let the vocals kind of like not be the concentration? Is it hard to concentrate on both because they're so opposite of each other? I'm sorry. To me, they are. I mean, like we mentioned prior in off-air conversations, how hard it is to play lead effectively while you're also singing the main vocal. Yeah,
but I try not to cut myself any breaks in any of the things that I do. I think I've been known as a songwriter first. I mean, that's what's gotten me probably the most traction because I've had a publishing deal and all my friends, that write their stuff, they send me shit like as soon as they're done with it. And that's my identity from other people's perspective. I was like songwriter first, but I don't really like songwriting. I like having written. I just happened to be something that just made sense to me out of the gate. I really don't like sitting down and doing it, and my process has been compile ideas, sit down and write when you have to, and that seems to work for me better than anything. But I really don't like writing, and a lot of people are going to go, that's strange. It is a lot of work for me because I beat myself up to a pulp writing, not just technically, but emotionally as well, because I find things that are really hard to deal with in these songs.
Okay.
That are, especially because of the content that I write about. But then also, too, as I write, I'm comparing myself to other great writers to make sure that I'm living up to the quality of what I want to write. So it might take me, I won't sleep. I'll write a song for 18, 20 hours straight. I'll sit in the room and I'll just do it, until it's right.
So you're a little obsessive over here.
Right?
Just a little bit.
But then I'll, and then I'll finish the song and I won't play it for anybody because I hate it and then I'll put it away and I'll give it 5 or 6 days and then I'll bring it out and I'll play it for Chablis or I'll play it for my drummer and then I'll start to do that, But then as a guitar player and a singer, I don't want to ever have insufficiencies as a guitar player or as a singer. So when I'm practicing those things, I'm comparing myself to the other stuff. So I try to take my favorite artists have always been that triple threat that could play guitar well, could sing well, and could also write well. And that was always my goal, was like be able to do everything. You don't always have to be doing everything, but be able to do all of these things because they all complement each other. So that way I'm never restricted by a song that I write I'm never restricted playing a song I wrote live by my inability to play guitar or my inability to sing it.
Because if you were, then you'd be writing to match your skill set as opposed to writing what's best.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I try to make sure all of those things are at the best level that they can be. Then that way, nothing is suffering.
Okay. A little deep there. I think I followed you. What is this Red Dirt Revival? I have to ask you because I did butcher the name and called it something completely different. It's embarrassing. Like
you still haven't told me what you said.
It's embarrassing more than it is like bad. It's just in my head I had it down as Red Dirt Devil.
Oh.
I'm thinking, that's kind of like weird. Where have I heard that before? And I typed that into Google. And I'm getting vacuum cleaner advertisements. And I have not heard like a dirt devil in forever, but apparently there's a red dirt devil thing. And I'm going, well, I know that's not it. Then there was another band that was called something similar, Red Dirt Devil Red Dirt Devil was a band. And I'm like, I know I'm messing this up somehow. So it's Red Dirt Revival. And it's a show, and I believe is it Texas country?
Yeah, so Red Dirt comes from Oklahoma, which is a subset of country music. And Texas country is a subset of country
Texans
music.
will never claim Oklahomans no matter what you try.
But it's really funny because this music movement started in both of those states. The Red Dirt, Oklahoma, Texas country movement,
Got it.
Outlaw country, Americana music kind of all started there. I mean, Americana music has been around for years, and Bob Dylan's technically Americana, CCR, all those guys. But I got really disenchanted with pop country. And
you don't say.
Yeah. it was probably 10, 13 years ago where it really started to get bad, where if you were paying attention enough, you could tell that everything was kind of formulated, and a lot of the stuff was auto-tuned.
Like a hip-hop beat behind it all.
Yeah, and the content of the songs were the same, which I never understood at all. Like, you can make stuff poppy, but just let's make it honest. And when everybody's singing about the same thing, how the hell could it be honest?
So they took the formula to the umpteenth degree.
Yeah, and I learned, I even got more disenchanted with it with my publishing deal because they were telling me to write this shit. They would say, not my manager or the owner of the publishing company by any means, because they hired me based on my skill set, but the people I was writing with would come in with a pitch sheet of who was buying songs, and then they would look at the top 10, and they would want to write within that staple of content that was in those songs: pickup trucks, beach songs, beer, whatever. And it was like, oh my God. So anyway, that started for me a long time ago, where I really started to hate that. Not because I have a problem with pop music or anything like that, but just because it wasn't honest and I didn't feel it.
Fair enough.
And then I started to find my buddy Gary Parkhill. We were at a rodeo, of all places, and he had just come to a show, and he loved my original stuff, but he wasn't crazy about the pop covers that I did, which is exactly the same way that I felt, which was really weird for someone to come up to me. And he'd burned me like a stack of CDs that had all of this Texas country, Red Dirt, Outlaw country, and Americana music on it. And I put them in my truck, and I got obsessed with it. It changed my life. I mean, the first song I heard was Resurrection by Wade Bowen, and we have been playing that song from the week after I got that CD since then. And that music just changed my life so much. And that's kind of how I got more into the singer-songwriter, Americana, rock, folk side of things. And as the years went by, I got a publishing deal. I was still touring. Everybody I met, I would send them links to this stuff and say, hey, because everywhere I went, I would meet somebody that just said, I really like what you do. I wish there were more people doing this. And I would say, well, there is. So it was always kind of my mission statement to not just spread my music, but spread people other music, because they felt like they had been left behind by the industry. And then my manager called me one day when I was in Nashville after a songwriting session, and he said, would you want to host this radio show, like a Red Dirt radio show in Pittsburgh? And I had never done anything like it, and it didn't even think about the consequences or the stipulations of what that might mean. Of radio. And I just said yes. I don't even think he finished the sentence. Like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, take me. I'll take the job. I don't care if I have to pay to do it. I don't give a shit. I'll do it. And then we were on Y108 for 2 years.
Yeah.
And we left there recently, but we're working on a new partnership that should be very, very good. And that's kind of the messages I got when the show was going. It was amazing because people had felt like they had found passion for music again, and they had found music that really meant something to them. Not that just when they heard on the radio they thought it was catchy and it was good to drive to, but stuff they sought out and shows that they wanted to go to, not because they wanted to drink with their friends, but because these artists have touched their lives. And not only did it do that, it blew my career out of the water compared to where we were.
Okay.
Within 4 months, I had just put a record out. We opened for Aaron Watson, and then like 4 days later, David Lee Murphy had to back out of 8-Man Jam, and Mark Anderson and Michael Young called me and said, "Hey, will you sit in David Lee Murphy's seat of all people?" It's like I gotta one up dust in a bottle. Like, are you freaking serious right now? But it was really cool. It was Joe Nichols, me, and then Gail Dodds, a bunch of really big artists.
Right.
And here's me, this independent kid, and it was amazing because I didn't get there by playing the game that everyone else had played.
Got it.
And then every month after that was better than the last. It was just crazy. I never had to say, I wish we were back in May playing that gig, because there was always another one that was better. And that's what happened from then until when COVID hit. That was the process. It just kept getting better and better and better, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And I never felt like I had to pander. It gave me an opportunity to play artists that I loved on the radio that I felt like should have had their time in the sun, that nobody knew about. People grabbed a hold of that, and by them grabbing a hold of that, they understood what I was doing musically as well. So, and I never had to become a quote-unquote radio host. All I had to do was talk about my passion for something that I believed in, and it worked. People liked it. People really liked it, and it was cool. So I'm excited to be doing that again. It was kind of hard when we got canceled and left there. It was a little bit of a kick, but I think the opportunity that we have is going to be a lot better for it.
That was an Intercom decision, right?
Yeah, it was an Intercom decision, and I totally get it. Like, I totally get it. I'm really glad. I mean, Mark Anderson has been an amazing mentor for me, and he actually wanted me on the show that replaced Red Dirt Revival, and I decided not to. It was my own decision. I actually hooked him up with Nick Tressler for Raise Rowdy that's in the slot now. We're very, very good friends. He helps me with Red Dirt Revival, and we talk about his radio show as well. And I just really didn't feel like it was time for me to say this was over.
Okay.
So I wanted to seek out opportunities, and my manager and I talked about it, and we pushing forward,
I completely understand. We're going to jump around a little bit here. You mentioned, at least in the information on your bio, which caught my attention months ago, in regards to what you learned in Waynesburg and what you dug growing up, it said Jimi Hendrix to Waylon Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wide gap there, man.
Yeah.
Now, was that more guitar playing, or was it also in reference to guitar playing and musical style? Early on, anyways.
The best way I can describe it was my grandfathers were two men, and are two men that I always think about the things that they taught me before I do anything, about work ethic, about just life in general, because they both have very different philosophies, but they're both incredibly successful. They're both the smartest people that I know. And my grandfather on my mom's side owned a motorcycle shop and was a professional motorcycle racer, and they both were gearheads, but we would build motorcycles together, and he would teach me all about mechanics, and then we would ride and all this shit. And in his shop, he was always listening to like Rolling Stones, and Hendrix would come on like on those radio stations that played all that shit. And I remember like hearing Sticky Fingers and the way Keith Richards played guitar, and then the Hendrix stuff would come on, and I loved like that psychedelic, just that it was just so hard to explain to me. And I was so young, then I think it was years later that I realized that shit resonated with me at such a young age. Like I remember those moments. Like I remember those songs coming on, Shine a Light. Like it was so visceral. And then in the car with my other grandfather on my father's side, we'd be driving back and forth to Florida or just driving around, and he'd have on like Larry Sparks and George Jones, and I remember that really crazy Celtic bluegrass stuff, and that spoke to me too, and I really enjoyed that stuff. And he'd be singing the bass lines, and like, you know, and he would talk about, you know, seeing Johnny Cash play, and it was just very weird because I never connected those dots until I had a guitar in my hand, and it just developed this really weird sense of, I love guitar playing and I love rock and roll, but I love the lyric sensibility and the sentiment of country music and of bluegrass music and Americana music, and I kind of tried to combine those two things. As I became a musician and started to understand that and really get into these artists and really understand them, that I almost kind of combined those things, and it was really weird as I started to develop what I did, because I really wanted to be in a rock band, but I really wanted to be in a country band, and I really wanted to be a good flat picker, but I also wanted to be able to play the stuff Hendrix did. And it's like, well, why don't you just learn all of it and see where you fall, you know?
Some kind of crazy amalgamation.
Yeah.
Of all that stuff.
But make it honest, you know, and hopefully it doesn't sound like it, you know, like a Hawaiian pizza.
Don Ho. Also part of your bio, and you did touch on it briefly, is that you were a staff writer for Lord and Thorn.
Yeah.
So explain to our audience what that is, who they are.
Basically, a staff writer is a songwriter that writes songs for a publishing company to sell to other artists. And every day, 5-6 days a week, sometimes 7, when I lived in Nashville, that's all I did. They would book me writing sessions. I'd get up every morning. I'd go to the office. I usually wrote 2 sessions a day. Most people do 1. And I would just write songs with these folks for people to sell to other people.
So you sat at a desk and did this, or
it was kind of like a room like this in a way, you know, but it was still very cubicle-esque, you know, and sometimes you'd have to go to the PRO's buildings like CSAC or BMI, and that was weird. And you were basically in office buildings writing songs. And
that sounds
you gotta write it,
oddly strange.
It is, and you got to write a song in 3 hours. You know?
Yeah, see, that seems oddly like the average fan wouldn't realize that, but it almost sounds like they're being sold to as a company would make a widget and have all these people working on making the widget and get the widget out, because we think about music being different, like organic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's the way I've always approached it. And I'm really glad that I did it. It's not for me. It's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I have friends that are really good at it, and that's their thing, and they do it really well, and the stuff they write is awesome. That's not the approach I like, but having to do it for that many hours a day, for that long, for years on end, made me be able to take a break like this in COVID and have confidence that I can sit down and write a song at any moment in time. You know?
So this is what I don't understand. How would you, if you were still having your own career and you're still an artist yourself, how do you decide which songs you're writing are for your work and which ones do you keep for yourself? And I don't mean that in a disingenuous way. I just mean from a creativity standpoint. I mean, you know, something's coming to mind, you're thinking of writing, and something is so good and touches you the way it does. Like, how do you not keep that for your own exploration, as opposed to turn that in as a...
I'm kind of open to either. I've had some people cut stuff that I'll still put on my records because I have every right to do that still. So I write the best songs that I can write, and if, let's say, Eric Church comes along and wants one of them, I'm not going to say no to that,
right.
Especially in the position that I'm in. That would be really foolish. But I've always loved songwriters that would write a song that, like, back in the 60s, 5 artists would cut because it was that good of a song, and then they would cut it too, and guess whose version was the best?
Okay.
Because there's always, like, an edge that the guy that wrote the song has, you know? I think from perspective.
So your perspective was just different than the way I described it, because I looked at it more, I guess maybe more selfishly, because you're creating something, but this song resonates with me. This is so good, I want to record this one. You're just saying, you're just creating and letting the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, and I used to think about it that way. I used to be very selfish about songs. But as I've kind of grown, I realized that I don't want songs to not get to people that I might not have the power to get them to get that to that song to that person, right? Because songs can be powerful. They can change your life.
No question.
And I don't want to be the guy that says no to a song getting cut by someone when I can still cut it myself. And it kind of botched that idea that that song's going to have success. It feels like that would be a bad move on my part. It took me a while to understand that and think about it, but I do think that was one of the biggest revelations that I had, because I still write songs. I'm like, I really, really hope that this becomes successful as me as an artist. But, you know, Little Past Crazy has been looked at a ton of times, and I just said, hey, I'm going to cut it, and I'm open to anyone else cutting it as well.
Okay.
You know?
Explain the difference between a songwriter and a lyricist.
I don't know. I think it's the ability to put, you know, melodies and lyrics together, and the guitar parts and stuff.
Okay.
But I look at that the same way as I look at that triple threat thing. You know, I've never been a guy that said, I used to write with people that say, I'm mainly a lyricist. And that was cool then, because you were doing a teamwork thing. But I never understood not wanting to be good at each one of those things, you know, as a lyricist and a melody guy and a guitar part guy.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's talk about the music business today for younger. I have to say, I can't say young with him anymore, because he's young, but he's been doing it for so long. Younger artists. You grew up in an era that, correct me if I'm wrong, outside of probably what you may have been given by your grandparents or your parents, you grew up in the digital age. Albums mean something to you probably totally different to what they mean to me, because the physical thing, when I think of an album, I think of the physical vinyl album.
Yeah.
A collection of songs. They could be 8 songs with no connection between them, but they're on this album. Or it could be, a lot of rock bands were very much in the stories and the way the whole album felt. Every song had to have a connection. I don't know. But an album is a collection of art from an artist that was put together, labeled, named, packaged, and then sold to us consumers. That doesn't seem to be happening much anymore, regardless of the format.
I still love records. Chablis and I buy them all the time. I love listening to vinyl. It's one of my favorite things to do. But we do, not only are albums dead in the sense that people just don't buy physical records anymore, I think they're dead in the sense that nobody really wants to listen to a collection of songs from an artist top to bottom.
Why, though? What has changed?
Attention spans, man. We live in a world where algorithms work the best when you're pissed off, and, you know, everything's got to be under 60 seconds. So how do you get someone to sit down and listen to 45 minutes worth of music, which breaks my heart, because I love making records. I like making... when I do a project, there's a reason why I do more than one song at a time. Not to say I won't ever put singles out, but, I mean, records to me have a whole message behind them with all of those songs together. The record I just put out has a whole message behind it, even though each song has its own message within it, but there's a whole package behind that. There's a whole ideal behind those songs. And I think people's attention spans are just different than they used to be, because it's an instant gratification world that we live in. You know, and that's the hardest thing I think we have to fight as human beings, is it's really easy to go grab instant gratification from anywhere at any moment in time. You get that dopamine hit from those likes on Facebook, you know. Is
music now disposable?
I don't think it's disposable. I think there's going to have to be a revolution for it. I think COVID and all the shit that we're dealing with right now as a human race is going to make us realize that we're missing something. And I think a lot of that is art, because I think art and music really connect everybody and give us a better perspective of kind of how we're all connected.
Okay.
We really haven't. This is the way I look at it, and it might be completely wrong. This is just my hope, maybe my blind hope.
All right.
We haven't been through shit for, like bad shit for how many years?
9/11 kind of sucked.
9/11 sucked, you know, but that was the last time that we really went, oh shit. Life is very fragile.
In these recent generations, yes. I mean, you could look to Vietnam probably. Well, there was Gulf War I, early 90s, Gulf War II, and they definitely affected the society. But you're right. Something on our homeland here, something that affects us here in the States. It's happened in
and
the
it's
States.
affected the whole. This has affected the whole world.
Right.
I mean, I have a pretty good grasp of history, but I don't know when the last time. I mean, probably World War II, the Spanish flu, things like that affected the whole world, and we've been. The cool thing about the human race that doesn't get talked about in the news at all is we have come so far.
Quickly,
very quickly, in a very short amount of time, with not just social justice and that stuff, but technology and healthcare, and these things have exploded in the past 20 years. Mm-hmm. We've lived on a cushy cloud of marshmallows and bullshit for a long time. Mm-hmm. And art and music are something we go to when we're lost and we don't understand what we're going through. At least for me, that's the way I've thought about it. And my hope is that through this we lean on honesty and good music and good art to help us understand where we are and help to rebuild. I mean, artists and creative people are the ones that revitalize cities. If there's tons of data on that. It's proven scientifically, not even just.
No doubt, no question, no question.
I hope that kind of revolutionizes music and the way that we care about the content of what we're listening to and what's in there. Not that it has to be all wholesome and there's no room for pop, but there's just a lack of honesty, I think.
Well, there's also a lack of honesty in the public as a whole, too.
Yeah.
I mean, the sad part about it is, for me, is that the pull on human nature is so strong to take the easy way out, even when it's really illegal, that downloading both music and video, movies as well as recording artists, was so instant, happened overnight, and they took advantage of it, and are still taking advantage of it. They, and I mean the public. I'm not putting me in there because I'm one of the last bastion of people that can't stand it. I buy what I want to consume. I'll listen to it if I hear it on the radio, whatever. Then I'll buy it. But that's some kind of weird principle I have, which is based upon the fact that y'all should be paid for what you create.
Yeah.
Novel idea, right?
Yeah.
But I'm disappointed that as much as we say we love music in this country, we are so easy just to go in and take it.
And that's contributed to the death of art. And Spotify and Apple Music and all
Your
Google
streaming
Play
services.
I'll call them right out. They have no problem with creating the illusion to people that they're paying money for music, because we don't get paid shit for the fact that you pay $10 a month for a subscription. It is criminal. It is criminal. And those people, the labels profit off of it. Everybody but the artists and the songwriters make money from this, unless you're freaking Taylor Swift. And she's called these people out, right? And there's arbitrages and trials and things going on right now that hopefully will change that, but I have my doubts. We might get a 40% increase. But what's 40% increase on we're only getting paid 1/3 of a cent for a stream on a good day?
Right.
I mean, and whenever you do that and you cede all the power to the corporations that have the money to crank out as much music as possible, well, of course you're going to have the death of art, because they're going to hire songwriters for $12,000 a year and leverage their dreams against them to write pop songs under the illusion that they may, in 1% of them, are going to become successful. And then they're going to continue to crank that shit out so they can keep their bottom lines. And then the people in my positions and Frank Vieira's positions and Rough Creek's positions and all of my friends, they get screwed.
No doubt.
I've got hundreds of thousands of streams on Spotify over the past year, and it doesn't even add up to $1,000.
It's crazy to me. It's crazy. Unlike the folks you mentioned, although Devin Johnson might be closer to my age, all of you won't remember, but there used to be a decent time in the music business. Now, I think the artists still got screwed over many times, even in the areas of record contracts and tours and, record company paid tours and all that stuff. But at least they were getting something of, and a lot of them became very wealthy. Your Led Zeppelins and your Kisses, and your ABBAs and all these bands in all different genres, Earth, Wind and Fire, bands from these bands of the 70s and the 80s, the early 90s, were in a system that paid them money. It was a viable system. You used to, believe it or not, in the 70s, you used to tour to promote the album sales.
Mm-hmm.
Now you tour to survive. You tour to make money on tour because there are no album sales, no matter how big you are, right? But it's all backwards now, and that's what I feel bad for. I think it's crazy that bands have to tour to eat.
Yeah.
As opposed to touring being a supplemental activity to support album sales.
Yeah, and when you have to tour constantly, it dilutes the creative process, which contributes to that as well. I mean,
makes you playing tight, though.
Yeah, it does. And I would still tour a ton anyway, but I mean, I'm in a position where when we get back to touring, one of the reasons why I haven't slowed down is because I couldn't afford to.
Right.
I couldn't stop. I've been pretty successful, but the lack of money and, part of the reason, there's always 1% of something that has most of it, and I understand that. That's a Pareto distribution. It's a law of nature. It's not
Absolutely
just criminal.
Right.
But
correct.
But they have found ways to make that worse.
Mm-hmm.
And they have found ways to manipulate and leverage people's dreams against them. And, I have friends that wrote country songs in the 90s that are still making big royalty checks from radio because they're getting played on radio, and radio's royalties are awesome. But guess where I can't get played? Radio, because the labels spend millions of dollars per song giving program directors Super Bowl tickets and what have you, and all this other stuff to get their artists played.
There's a word for that, payola, right?
Yeah.
It comes in all different forms, but it's still a thing.
They can't give them cash anymore, but they'll give them a lot of other stuff,
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Compensation's compensation.
Yep.
Yeah, and that seems to be... Now, that always has been around because that's how the bands in the 60s and the 50s and the 60s and 70s and 80s, how they broke was making sure they got played on the radio.
Yeah.
Didn't make it right then. Doesn't make it right now, but it's even harder now, I think.
But in the 80s, wasn't there still an element of a jock, because a radio jock could play what they wanted to, and if they found a band that they loved, they would still do it?
I think it depended a lot on the station, and most of the stations were scripted pretty hard, and once in a while you would get a DJ or a jock, I believe, and I wasn't there, but I'm guessing, I wasn't my field, but I believe if they were respected enough and powerful enough in their own market, they could do some things on their own. And that's how bands get a spark. A rock band called Rush got a spark by a Cleveland DJ in 73, 74. And that story just goes, it sparked there, and then it just kind of, grew from there because one DJ took it upon herself, I think it was, to play that album. There's some song that was like 10 minutes long, Working Man by Rush. It was 10 minutes long. And she was
that
playing,
would never fly today.
She was playing the song because she had to have a bathroom break. And those old rock songs were called bathroom songs, fillers. Yes had a bunch of them. They were very long. That way a DJ would put it on an album rock station and then go to the bathroom and come back, have time, right?
Yeah.
But she dug the song, really dug it. And so you get that spark, and then it could organically grow. It probably could happen today, too, if you could get on the station. If you had... But all the DJs and friends that I know in this business from all genres of music talk about how everything is pretty much scripted out days in advance.
I was told that I had one of the only radio shows in the country on a major market station where I did all of the programming.
Wow, how about that?
I don't know if that's true or not, but
you played everything that you wanted to play.
I had nobody telling me what to do.
Wow.
And as long as I didn't break the law of the FCC, I could do whatever I wanted. And that was cool. I didn't play singles all the time, man. I would just find the best songs and play them. And that's how I plan on continuing to do it.
People want that, though.
Yeah.
They want that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was some formulation to how I did it where I understood that I had to play songs regularly each week to get people in. So I'd probably pick 10 of those and loop them for a few weeks, because that was a weekly show, and I had a following that would come back each week and listen to find this music. And sometimes you got to hear a song 2 or 3 times before you get it, you know, especially really good deep stuff. You know, it doesn't.
Absolutely.
My biggest thing to anybody listening to music is, if you don't like it the first time, don't discredit it.
Yeah.
Give it a
And that
minute.
probably happens a lot today, though, right? In today's, you know, very immediate society.
Yeah, they write it off. Well, I mean, even labels write it off if they don't like it the first time. I tell everyone, like, 3 times. Listen to a song 3 times before you give an opinion on it. And if somebody sends me music to listen to, I do not give them an opinion on it until I've listened to it at least 3 times or given it X amount of days to live with it.
Do you think music fans in today's climate are sophisticated enough as music fans that they will be open enough in their own time, how we spend our time, to discover things anymore?
I don't know. I really don't know. I try, like you've said it 1,000 times to me and on your other shows, that I try to be optimistic about everything. But I just don't know. And I try not to think about that too much. I really try not to, because a lot of it's just social climate, man. People got a lot of shit to worry about. They got a lot of shit to worry about.
See, we always had a lot of shit to worry about.
Yeah.
And I think we're worrying about a lot of is it inconsequential or inconsequential bullshit today.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it's not even real.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
I mean, our whole society is driven on fear and anger, because that's what sells ad dollars on television and even on social media. You know, I mean, it's.
Do we feel that we don't have enough time anymore? I can't. This is so deep, and I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but it's worth a mention. Like, do people that like music, or young people that think they like music and they haven't fairly figured it out yet, are they capable of working through the immediacy or the culture of immediacy that they're in right now, to give themselves enough time and space to search out and discover and then see if they enjoy a certain piece of music?
I think everybody has that ability, and it relates back to anything that you do. And I think it's a lot of the reason why everyone's pissed off, because they don't understand the problems that we have, and then we can't fix them overnight. It's going to take time. If anybody realizes that if you spend time with something to find what really matters to you and what really makes a difference, not just to you, to other people, that pays off tenfold rather than the thing that works right away.
Okay.
You know, I mean, instant gratification will get you through the day, but you're going to be in a shithole in 10 years if you don't play the long game. You know what I mean?
No, agreed.
And I think that from the music perspective, if you listen to these things that are not honest and are instant gratification based songs, not only will you move on to the next song next time you hear something the next day that is cool to you, you're never going to be in touch with those emotions and ideas that might move you forward as a person. You know? If it's just talking about, you know, I want to go have a drink tonight on Friday night, which is, there's room for that music and it's important.
Right.
But I think you can do it in a way that has more than just that in it.
Okay.
You know?
How about this little hypothesis? I believe that in the era of social media, and I'm going to go back from 2010, I'm only going to take it back to 2000. Well, you know what? From 2020, I'll take it all the way back to 2010. I know there was Facebook in 2008. I know there was MySpace, but that's just for sake of argument. 2010, 2020, 10 years. The problem I see is the artists who became very famous, very cultsy, very exploitative on social media, they have a significant advantage now in their ability to stay on the top of the mountain because of the short attention span that their followers are maneuvering their lives with. Because when life was slower and life was less complex and less was being thrown in our faces with screens and the rest of that stuff, people could breathe and slow down because they weren't being bombarded by sensory stuff, right? So to be on the top of the mountain, you had challengers that people would be interested in checking them out. So all these artists competed, and the cream always rose to the top, and you had more people on the mountain. Now I think the last 10 years, the ones that have ascended the mountain have these loyal followers who are almost brainwashed because primarily, I don't even think it's based on quality. They're there and brainwashed because it's the easiest thing. It's the familiarity. And they're already in the top. Why would I go look anywhere else? They're more loyal. They're more, although they may not warrant being loyal to. They're more loyal, and it's just easier to keep. I think of Kanye West. I'm sorry to do that. I think Kanye West constantly as being an example of this, where he could do anything right now musically. And while there are critics all across the country that'll write and do video reviews that'll try to tear him down, the average person who subscribes to Kanye West to the day that man dies is going to be right with her no matter what he wants to do. He has that advantage. Before 2010, that particular advantage was not there. You had to fucking earn it.
Yeah.
All the time.
Constantly.
Or you got knocked off the mountain.
Yep.
Going back to the 90s, 80s, 70s, same thing. In these last 10 years, I think that first mover advantage since 2010, it's hard to get knocked off, man.
Yeah, it's I don't know, and it's something that I think about a lot for sure, but I don't know what the answer to it is, and I think I probably shouldn't think about it too much, because in my position, the only option is to move forward.
Yeah,
and to keep beating my head against the wall.
The playing field isn't level. I won't say that. I don't like the word fair ever, but the playing field, technology-wise, is not level now to let people breathe, or encourage them to breathe and check out new things, because it's too easy just to be spoon-fed the same shit from the same 50 artists who are at the very top of the mountain with ridiculous amounts of accolades, ridiculous amounts of followers, and ridiculous amounts of money. It's just easier to keep going back to that same trough. Yeah,
and once someone is looped into their feed, they keep getting stuff in their feed. It's the same thing politically. It's really funny because the cognitive dissonance is all based on algorithms, right? If you have, your political feed and mine might probably look pretty similar. So when we talk about it, we go, I can't fucking believe that anybody thinks this way. I can't believe that. But if we looked at our news feeds, they're probably pretty similar. You and I think fairly alike politically. But
we're wading somewhere in the middle of the country.
Yeah, but then you have someone out there that has a full left timeline and a full right timeline, and they don't understand not only the left, because they're like, everything I see agrees with what I think, or agrees with my anger, right? And they're thinking the same thing, and they don't understand the moderate in the middle either. So you literally create the world you live in digitally. And the algorithm's job is to get ads in front of you and get content in front of you that you're going to continually watch. So it's almost like as an artist, you're stuck in this world of how do you break through to these people's timelines when they are already inundated with bullshit that they know it's not going to make them happy, and it's not going to show them something positive. The algorithm's job, the most successful way to get someone's ad dollars on Facebook for a low cost and keep them engaged, is either piss them off or scare them. It's the same thing with TV.
That's true.
I had a conversation with my bonus daughter, as I call her, Kennedy, one day when the riots were going on. The whole family was kind of out of sorts. It was just a weird time for everybody. And I was scared. Her mom was scared. She was scared. We were just kind of all talking about it. And I had to sit down and talk. She came downstairs and was talking to me about this. And I didn't really know what to say. But when you're looking at the news, it's all bad shit. It's always all bad shit. They weren't showing the cops that were marching with everybody. They weren't. They were twisting the narrative to keep people in front of the TV. So
it's not about good optics. It never is.
So my two explanations. Where first of all, the main thing to take away from this is you just have to be good to everybody. And if you see someone discriminating or being mean or doing anything unjustly to somebody, you need to stand up and say something, and just be good to everybody that you can be good to. And the other thing is when you watch the news, keep in mind that they have to sell advertisements, and they have to keep people in front of the TV. And the best way to keep somebody in front of the TV is to make them mad or scare them. So keep that in mind when you're watching the news and when you're on social media. Keep that in mind. And I think we should all make a conscious effort to pay attention to the things that are positive on these things and try to change that algorithm. Because if we
Good news
did
is
that,
not sexy, though. Case in point, I remember being a young person in the early 80s. Anyone that's listening or viewing our show that knows of this show can remember, I'd love to see your comment here in the thread. There was a show, to my memory, that the Turner Broadcasting Network, which became TBS, had on cable in the early 80s. And it was a 30-minute news program from Atlanta for the whole country to watch. It was called The Good News. And it was literally about 30 minutes of good, feel-good stories. It was called The Good News, I think. Early 80s. That freaking show lasted like 8 months, 4 months, 3 months, and it was gone. And never to be heard from again. The concept was tried, but it just does. It's not sexy. I mean, it's just not. And it's a shame. I mean...
But the news shouldn't be something that has to entertain us.
Bingo. That's the issue. That's the issue, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's all manipulated, and they're all corporations that have to make money. You know what? And
it's entertainment anymore.
I don't exactly, and I don't know what the answer to solve this problem is. I don't know if it's nonprofit news organizations, which those become just as corrupt.
Well, they all get. We used to say PBS was an independent source. Well, sometimes it is kind of. I never thought it really was. I thought they kind of leaned left.
They're publicly funded, and guess what? The people that fund them have agendas, and they funnel that right down the pipeline.
Absolutely. There was the McLean-Lair News Hour, which was on PBS, and I found both of those gentlemen to be kind of straight shooters growing up. Yeah, I think there has been attempts to really do that. But again, how is the news going to get distributed to the masses? Well, through a for-profit broadcasting outfit. Right?
Until the platform changes. I mean,
exactly
podcasting has done a lot
This is a Wild West, but this is the new Wild West. I don't know where it's going. And please don't regulate us, please.
But I mean, before I started listening to Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and Tim Cass, like all the different, I mean, there's tons of them from all ends of the spectrum that I listen to get my ideas, right?
You have to.
Before that, I was scared and depressed all the time.
Sure.
Sure. And I understand that feeling. I mean, and not everyone has time to listen to Joe Rogan talk to Ben Shapiro and I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, somebody from the left for 3 hours a day.
Absolutely.
I've been blessed to be able the ability to do that. I spend a lot of time in the car. I spend a lot of time at home.
A lot of people are finding that. They're seeking programs like Rogan that will bring these heavy hitters on, these intellectual thinkers, these people that do critical thinking. And Joe lets them go. He steers the conversation from a content standpoint to get it all out. Yeah. And I don't mean steering like toward a slant, just getting all the content out, which I think he does a great job on it.
And then they can break it down into digestible clips.
Absolutely.
Too.
And then people can make up their own fucking mind because isn't that what it's all about to begin with?
Exactly.
Right?
And there's nothing wrong with someone disagreeing with you. Like, critical thinking is freaking
there isn't.
dead.
There's nothing wrong with that, but they in this country people believe that there is something wrong.
Yeah, and the idea that the left can survive without the right and the right can survive without the left is complete bullshit. I mean, we have all the data in the world to prove that is not correct.
Let me be very careful when I say this. I am very much 1,000% okay with having a Democratic Party, a Libertarian Party, a Communist Party. I'm good with all of it. I'm good with the differences.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in a world where we're all automatons and thinking and acting the same way. Those differences are that's the juice of life.
Yeah.
That makes life interesting. You got to have the yin and the yang, but I think there's a bunch more in there too. It's just when it becomes caustic and you literally want to get vitriol about it, and you want to argue, or you want to cause harm to other people, that's the part I can't stand. It's not that we're different.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we're different. The fact that we are not sophisticated enough as a species, and I'm talking about fucking humans, that we cannot look at differences of skin color, gender, thought, hair, anything.
Mm-hmm.
We can't look at those differences and either be indifferent about them because they really don't matter, or we can't rejoice in them. But we have to go negative with them. The fact that we are not sophisticated enough as a species to understand that is the beauty, the inner beauty of life. We should cherish that. The fact that we can't do that shows how really flawed we are.
Yeah. I mean, why can't we all just walk into every conversation and say, with the assumption that this other person probably knows something that I don't?
It would take humility.
Yeah, it would, but I mean,
we fight for positions we know are wrong.
Yeah,
just because we chose them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We wear them as badges of identity.
Yeah,
I believe X is true. All of a sudden, I read something, I read multiple things, I hear lectures proving that X is not true, but I've already invested my reputation into it. I want to fight for X to the death because I have to.
Well, that's your group. That's your group identity, and God forbid you be an individual, right?
Exactly right.
I mean,
exactly right.
If you sat down and had a conversation with somebody and told them it wasn't going to be a political conversation, and asked them how they felt about certain issues, there is no way in hell, if you could keep it from being a battle like a militaristic thing, which that's always what it comes to, you're never going to have anyone that agrees with every platform issue perfectly on one side or the other. Never. And I recognize that in high school, friends.
Yeah. And I am a dimwit. I mean, I barely graduated high school. I flunked out of college. There is nothing special going on in this brain. Nothing. But I realized right away, and I'll say it, I realized right away growing up in this town and growing up with registered Democrats in the family and looking at the Democratic platform, that there were elements of that platform. And why I was doing this at 17 years old, I had a good history teacher, Mrs. Riddle, I love you. But looking at the 1980 Democratic Party platform, the tenets of it, which were long, but reading those through and agreeing with some and not agreeing with some. Some didn't jive with my religion. Based upon this little mill town, you could probably guess what big religion that was. It didn't jive with it. So when I ask the big picture questions, because it's 16, 17 years old, the big picture questions are, how are you espousing this to be a way of life when you're just going to church and doing something different? For me, that was a problem. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that it's okay. It's okay to agree with part of it and not the other part.
Yeah.
And that's what I was told by reasonable adults in the area. You vote where you think you're going to do the most good. That's how I was raised. Now, everything's a fucking litmus test.
Yeah.
You got to believe it, right? I mean, you may not believe anything Republicans have to say, but there's one. Maybe you're a gun fanatic, but everything else on that platform you disagree with. But that gun thing's a big thing for you. So now all of a sudden you are not only, of course, you're a card-carrying member of the NRA. Nothing wrong with that. But you use that one issue to brand yourself with a party that you don't have anything else in common with. Do you see how fucked up that is?
Yeah. Oh, trust me, dude. You're preaching to the choir.
And this is
I got an argument.
It's insanity, man.
I got an argument with a college professor one time. I was 18 years old, and I never understood how I learned about Hitler my whole life and how bad the fascists were. But not once, and my whole generation, I ask everybody this whenever I go down this rabbit hole. None of my friends, my fiance, none of my siblings, none of them have learned about communism and how many people it killed. I learned about that when I was 17 or 18 years old, and Mao. I learned about that when I was 17, 18 years old, and I was getting indoctrinated by this college professor who said that fascism was a deadly indoctrination, and it is, and it's a terrible thing, and that's all they talked about.
Right.
And it was like a sociology class or something like that, and I brought up in the class, I said, you know, she said that this indoctrination killed more people than any other type of political society, basically. And I said, well, what about the communists? And she got dead quiet.
Well, of course. Of course.
And I brought up Stalin and Mao and how in those societies they killed hundreds of millions of people. Okay, if you know those two things, that fascism killed millions of people and communism killed millions of people, you have to understand that the answer is not here, it's somewhere here.
Right.
And in order to do that, we have to be able to listen to each other and think about where we want to end up.
Yeah, that's logical, and that's certainly what could be considered critical thinking. And that is, it doesn't, again, fit certain people or certain groups' agendas. And whatever agenda was going on with that particular teacher, who they belonged, who their slant was, they had some kind of affiliation with somebody. Their whole university could have had a different affiliation. We don't know. But again, a pragmatic way of looking at life is a better way to live. I wish as a younger person, through my turbulent times, I wish I had done more of this. I did some, but not enough. The older I am now, I look at everything completely with skepticism. I try to make decisions based on pragmatism, and I'm not perfect. But my goodness gracious, some of the things I see, friends of mine, wonderful people, like destroying each other on social media. I used to laugh. It's not really funny anymore. It's kind of sad. I think, and I'm entrenched in social media. Like, you're an artist, you're entrenched because that's part of your marketing. Part of the marketing of the show, the marketing of my realtor practice. We're there.
Yeah.
I don't want to bash it as a vehicle for communication. But the way it's being used by the bulk of the citizenry is not productive, man.
I think we underestimated its power. I think it's still in its adolescent ages. And the problem is there was no, I don't even know what the word for this is. No approach as to how it should be used.
Okay.
You know, I mean,
okay.
You're taught your whole life manners and how to speak to someone face to face.
Right.
Right? Like, if we completely disagreed and we were both internet trolls sitting here talking, chances are the conversation is probably going to be pretty civil. We might not walk away with any other different ideas or changing our mind, but we're probably not going to insult each other. Because where I grew up, if you ran your mouth and you insulted someone, you got your ass beat, right?
Or at least you got punched in the mouth.
Yeah, or something was going to happen, or you were going to be put in an uncomfortable confrontation.
Right.
Whether that be verbal or physical, it doesn't matter. If someone's pissed off at you and they tell you, you're going to go home and think about it, right?
You're damn straight.
All of a sudden, we're behind a keyboard, and you say something I don't agree with, it's a hell of a lot easier to lay into you.
Yeah, there's no question. And that's where all the vitriol comes from, too, I think, when there's no consequences.
Yeah.
There's no consequences for your actions, for your words. And I think that's part of the issue we do have when we don't understand each other. We just don't understand each other. We don't understand each other based on race. We don't understand based on gender. We don't understand based on nationality. We don't understand based on politics. We don't understand based on sports teams. And people laugh when I say that, but I'm going to tell you something. Listen, the Yankees and the Boston fans, the Yankee fans and the Red Sox fans have been fighting each other forever. But it's even caustic to the point where there's things that they fight each other. There's a lot of, it's not even remotely civil anymore. And I think that bleeding into even sports is kind of, that caustic nature is coming straight from social media, straight from our political system. I think really it does come from social media. I think social media is the top right now. Not that kind of behavior didn't happen before social media, but it's not like it is today.
Well,
it's so encompassing.
You see something on the news, and then you would go to dinner, and you would have a conversation about it, like an in-person conversation. And this has gotten worse through COVID because we're not around people. At least before, we were still having conversations, and you could distill the idea down a little bit to get closer to the middle.
Good point.
Right? You know, I mean...
Well, the middle's where everything lies.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that. Now, the middle's a big pull, and there's a little bit of a middle lean toward the right and a little bit of a middle lean toward the left, and I guess you have your fence dwellers. I get it. But the middle is a big... I encourage anybody who wants to come into the middle. There's plenty of room.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But everything ultimately gets solved in the middle. Mm-hmm. Every judge that's one way or the other, generally moves toward the center over a career. Federal politicians kind of slowly move toward the center. You have your outliers, but generally everything kind of gets done in the middle because we need each other. Mm-hmm. We lost that somehow.
Well, that's what shuts down the government when they can't get shit done. I mean, I don't know. It's almost exhausting to think about the fact that we can't talk. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because I do my research when I hear one thing on every platform I can find it on.
You have to.
I mean, when you look at all of the shit that's going on, it is a tiny, 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 tiny minority that is screaming incredibly loud. Mm-hmm. The silent majority is a huge thing, and nobody talks about it.
Well, we live in the era of extremes.
Yeah, well, then they do polls. They only ask those people what they think.
Of course.
So then they throw it on whatever news network to whatever agenda they're doing, and they get the answer they want. People, the polls aren't real.
No. Well, a lot of what you see, too, is, again, a reflection of the extreme in any circumstance. Mm-hmm. Bad thing happens, and a car wreck's a bad thing. But car wrecks happen all over this country. But if they want to make an issue out of this particular car wreck, if there's some reason why they want to make an issue, for whatever reason, they will find a way. All you have to do is find a couple people who saw the car accident, and
find the
one
narrative
saw it
that
one
works.
way, one saw it another way. The next thing you know, you have a national event going on. Mm-hmm. You got a fucking international incident going on something that's basically very remedial, happens all the time. So anything can be manipulated, anything.
Yeah.
And I know we went off on a deep tangent.
I enjoyed it though.
Social media, but social media itself, and the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because it's so important to all entertainment, but especially music. Because I think it's been the sword that's hurt music, but I also think from a standpoint of connecting with each other, it can be the thing that saves music too.
Well, I've spent a lot of this time, this is one of the positive things I've done, learning these algorithms and learning the marketing side of things and trying different tools and trying to figure out how to leverage my position on these platforms. I'm getting there. I'm learning more and more all the time. I do this consulting for a few companies, and I enjoy it. But I probably never would have done that if it weren't for COVID. So, I mean, the way social media is geared is really weird, and I don't...
What do you mean? Try to unpack that a bit for me.
It goes back to that thing of frustration and anger that keep people in front of it, but that's not the only thing that people are getting. So how do you get... First of all, how do you find your audience when you're not touring? That's that's a weird thing. And if I can figure that out now and get back to touring, things will compound quicker than I can imagine.
Understood.
So I'm trying to figure out how to find an audience on social media that already have content in front of them. How do I get my content in front of them?
Okay.
How do I get them to get into my rabbit hole as well as all the other ones that they're in, right? How do I do that? And then hopefully I can spread that love out to all my friends that are making content, right? But that's one thing I've really been focused on. Every day I spend a couple hours reading and studying and trying to figure out what's going on in these things. And they're incredibly, incredibly complex, layered systems, I mean, and it's been really revolutionary and hard to figure out. But over the past 2 weeks, I've really kind of got into some cool stuff of how I figure out by collecting data, and which is kind of creepy, but it's the way that the ad systems work, where you can create audiences and figure out, like, well, this person has watched my video so many times, and then if I put another one out, they're more likely to see it. So, and then putting out content that works, not necessarily pandering, but being able to test content and say, oh, this one's working really well.
Where does it blur, though? Where does that blur? you got to be careful that you don't taint your creative process based upon the data that you discover.
Well, I put it all out. I do everything I want to do.
Okay.
But then so everything I do is honest in the way that I want to do it, right?
Okay.
So I don't deviate from that at all. But let's say I put 10 songs out. I let the data collect on what songs are doing the best, and then that's the one I put the money behind.
Got it.
That's the one I decide to send to blogs and to make videos on and things like that. To try to use the instead of getting out there and say, hey, this is the single. Like, I don't really have a single on Wizard yet because I still don't know what song they're performing equally well. It's really weird.
Understood.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. So back to music. Talk a little bit about this latest album.
Wizard is well, first of all, it's called Wizard because my first really, really influential music mentor named Dave Houlihan, who passed away of cancer a few years ago, he had his trucker handle was Wizard. Still Get Stoned is about him and I rolling joints and talking about life, and him teaching me a lot when I was younger about things that I just couldn't wrap my head around without some help, you know.
Right.
And he told me right before he passed away that the hardest songs to sing are probably the ones people need to hear the most. And these songs are songs I wrote never with the intention of putting out. They were something I needed to do in a moment that I had something to say, and songwriting was the best way I knew therapeutically how to deal with that.
Got it.
You know?
Got it.
So this whole record is about mental health in a way, and as an adult man in our society, we can't talk about those things. You know, it's a weird problem. I've had a lot of friends and family go through that, and I just thought, you know, when COVID happened, I had already started kind of recording these songs, and I'd recorded a ton of them in Interval Studios with my buddy Johnny, because he opened the studio and said, hey, you want to come do some stuff? And I thought, yeah, sure, and if something cool turns out, we'll put it out. But then COVID happened, and I realized my mindset of where I was in this studio was all based on this idea because I was completely lost mentally.
Got it.
Because I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
The rug had been ripped out from under me. I had a record deal on the table, and now that's completely gone.
Understood.
Because of this shit. And I really started to think about where I was mentally and narrow these songs down to ones of always thinking about that idea of what Dave said.
Okay.
What are the hardest ones? Like, a lot of these songs I've never played live because they're that cathartic.
Got it.
They're that hard to say. Yeah, and that was the idea behind this record.
Do you think at some point in time that, are you ever going to be forced, or are you ever going to be lured, I should say, to go the singles route and not record an album? Because you seem like a purist in that regard to me, at least philosophically.
I mean, I think there'll be a push for that. I think every artist, I've even been in positions where I've been pushed towards that.
Okay.
I obviously haven't agreed with it.
Thank goodness.
I don't know where the happy medium is.
Okay.
Because I feel like I have a responsibility to my crew and my band to get this to the next level and grow it to where not everyone's having to work 3 jobs, you know. But at the same time, I don't want to distort my message. And I know that in their hearts, they would never ask me to do that. Every song I put out, I can promise there's going to be honesty involved in it. I'm going to believe it, whether I wrote it or not. But I don't know. I don't want to say never. You know, if I have my way,
absolutely,
I'll always be putting records out.
Right.
There'll be singles on those records, just like there always has been. Yeah. But I never want to. There'll be a phase. I mean, I've thought about, like, well, maybe between now and this next record, I'll put singles out. You know, and maybe those can be breadcrumbs to the record that comes. But I always want to be working on the next record, and if I put music out in between, maybe that's how I juxtapose that position. Maybe that's how I balance it. Maybe that's how I figure it out.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. Maybe that's how I can live in both worlds. You know, I think John Mayer's done that a lot lately.
All right.
You know, but I don't know. I never want to stop making records, ever. That will never happen.
First and foremost, are you a performer or a songwriter?
I would say a performer.
Okay.
from what I enjoy the most.
Okay.
My favorite thing is interpreting songs and music live and delivering that message. Like I
Okay.
said earlier, I've been recognized as a songwriter because that's how my career really started to get traction, but I don't necessarily enjoy that. I really don't. It takes a lot of motivation for me to sit down and write.
So if you would be okay if other songwriters had some really interesting and groovy songs, things that you found, I don't know, resonated with you, you'd be totally fine going out and playing others' music.
If I do that, it would be very limited. I would say less than 10% of my career would probably be that. I could say that confidently.
Okay.
Because the reason I don't like writing is because it's incredibly hard for me emotionally to do.
Okay.
And it's incredibly exhausting for me mentally. It
Okay.
always has been. But when I'm done writing, I feel really good, you know? And my favorite part about writing is taking those songs and playing them live to people, because then that's when I see the songs doing their work in the world, right? So that's the part I enjoy the most. It's like songwriting is like, I don't even know how to put this into words. Like if you're like if a Formula One team doesn't develop their car between races, they're going to keep losing, you know? But the fun part is racing the car. That's
Absolutely.
the part that we
Yeah.
all love,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
It's like, of course they don't like having a wrench in their hands all the time. They'd rather be in the car driving, you know?
I get it.
I think that's the way I look at it.
Many years ago, and it wasn't in conversations I had, but it was an interview. I remember that Paul Stanley of Kiss said something that always stuck with me, and that was that when he wrote a song, or at least when he wrote in the 70s, what he loved was that what he was writing, he could visualize, while doing the process, visualize playing it live. He could see where the studio was going to sound this way, with the little things he could do live. He could work with it. Like there was a palette there for me to really dive into. I could see it. It was out there.
Yeah.
He said they went to the 80s and everything got weird because things were being done faster, and guitars were being played faster, and there was all this technology, and he sometimes couldn't see how a song was possibly going to translate from the record they were making to the stage. Any of them. So, it just changed for him. And it wasn't until he got back to songwriting and insisting upon more organic songwriting where he started to feel comfortable again. Not that you use maybe that much technology. Maybe you do, I don't know. Have there ever been songs you've written that, I don't know, that when it's being recorded and it's starting to flesh out, you think it's okay, it's good, it's gonna go over maybe, but I can't see myself playing this live. I don't know what this is going to play like live. I don't know if it's going to sound right live. I'm just not certain that it's going to be a good song live. Has that ever been a problem for you?
It's never happened to me yet. I'm not saying that it won't, but I've tried to always write songs and then go play them live for a little bit, or at
Okay.
least sit in a room with the band and explore them. And then if I have to manipulate it a little bit or change it or approach it differently, because I want the live shows to be the best that they can be. I think if you can have a really good live show, undoubtedly you're going to be able to have a good record. I don't think it's the other way around.
Okay. Because everything's it's multi-tracked,
Yeah.
and so many pieces now are cut in isolation booths.
Well, we cut our records completely live. I will
That's good to know.
I will do the vocals
That's good to
again,
know.
but like Wizard, no joke, full disclosure, that is me stoned with a guitar in front of 3 microphones, all of it.
Okay.
I did some overdubs with little instruments, and harmonies came in second, but the core of the song, and there's some songs where that's all it is just me and a guitar. And people ask me like, why do you say you got stoned? It's like, well, for me, with some of those, I couldn't get in the middle of it. Like, you know what I mean? So I performed it like if I was playing to people when I was trying to get in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that like the isolation of playing songs, like normally a lot of people, they cut the guitar and then they cut the vocal and then they cut this. When you're totally right, you'll lose that translation. It's really hard to cut a record when you're doing guitar and acoustic simultaneously, because you have to get a full perfect take.
No question.
You can't punch in.
No question.
So that whole record is done that way. It was incredibly challenging to do.
Sometimes the little idiosyncrasies are healthy, though, right? I mean,
Well, there's a bunch of them on there. It sounds like an old soul record, because you'll hear like, oh, well, that's not necessarily a mistake or wrong, but
no, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah, but he probably didn't mean to do it that way, you know. And
that makes it good, though.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what people have latched onto with this record, is like there is brutal honesty in it. And even with Half About Women, the little EP I put out before this, when we went into the studio with the band and I hired those guys, I already knew what I wanted to do. It was, I ran my amp into another room, so then that way it wasn't bleeding through the mic, and we cut everything live. And the band loved it, because they never get the chance to do that. And that's why that visceral thing came across on that record. Like, how did you do this? I said, well, I cut it like a Stones record. They're like, what do you mean? I said, there was no click tracks. There was no overdubbing. We did the only thing that we did.
On Main Street.
Yep, the only thing we did after the fact was vocals and harmonies. I'd go back in and do those.
Yeah.
But I knew I could do that, because I knew that when the tracks were playing in my ears in the vocal booth at Curb Records, that I would be able to get into that moment.
Right.
Because I was playing on it and I was feeling it, and it was a real thing. And people just don't cut records like that anymore.
Yeah, I don't get it. It seems to me that would actually I mean, I don't mean technology-wise or technique-wise, but performance-wise, it seemed like that'd be easier.
Honestly, well, I think a lot of the reason why people don't do it anymore is because I don't think there's a lot of people out there that can.
There's not a lot of good players anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
really good players. People that are very comfortable with their instruments.
Yeah, I mean it when I say my band are complete and utter badasses. I mean, they are very responsible for how far we've been able to get.
Got it.
You know, I mean, and that's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing. You can play well live, but being able to play well live in a studio is a whole different ballgame, because if you hit a note live, you can go right past and keep on going. But if you do that in the studio, it's living forever, man. And if we're on the clock, you know, if I've rented a studio and we only have it for a day and we got to cut 12 songs, like, that's a bitch. That's a real bitch, you know.
No doubt.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, no, I get it. If you had your druthers, let me just put you this way. If oh, this is so cheesy. But if you were stranded on a desert island and you had a choice to go and take one, an electric and an amp, I don't know where you get the battery power long term to play the electric guitar. But
There's one outlet on the
island.
island.
One outlet. There's just imaginary electricity forever, let's just say. Would you rather play electric or acoustic? Where do you find the most joy? I know it's going to be a tough question.
That's a really hard question.
I thought so. That's what we do around here.
I don't know. The problem is it depends on the song.
Two
And it depends
different
on a
animals,
band
huh?
or
Two
band or
different
not.
animals.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, for a long time I always wanted to be playing lead when I was on stage, because I wanted to be a show off. And then as I developed as a songwriter, I realized that I wanted the band to be tasteful and just wanted things to be in the right place. And Eris is an insanely good lead player, specifically slide and blues stuff. And there's tons of shit that he does, even more so, that I can't do. But I've tried to have other guitar players play the way that I play acoustic when I do like open dadgad tunings on certain songs, and it just doesn't sound the way that I want it to sound. And so then I'll pick that up and do it, you know? So
now, the nuances of an acoustic are so different from player to player. It's almost impossible to duplicate.
Yeah, well, really any type of guitar, really.
Yeah, but especially on acoustic, don't you think?
Yeah, it's the way the tone quality of your hands really comes out.
I think so. Whereas if you with electric, all things being equal and everything being set the same, you can get closer between multiple players than you can with an acoustic.
I think that's why people really grab a hold of electric so much, because they want to sound like that. They'll chase that till they get there, and that's
every kid, right?
Yeah, that's their success. You know what I mean? Is I can sound like that person. You know?
Yeah.
But that was never really my goal. I wanted to chase some of those things to understand them, but I wanted to find my own tone.
Are you a tone junkie then?
Oh yeah.
You're a tone junkie.
Yeah.
He's one of those kind of guys.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what that means, basically, you tell them what that means. Tone junkie.
Like a gearhead. Well, I constantly buying pedals and manipulating my amp and all kinds. I used to run a huge, like, a big studio rig with 2 amps with
Sound
ping pong delays and shit.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. I recently switched to a Vox AC30 with 112. It's just the top boost channel, which is I've played through boutique custom shit my whole life. Like the rarest weird thing that I could find. My guitars are still that way. But I found this Vox that was like $600.
Yeah, that's how it usually works.
And it's amazing. And every single one of them is amazing. Like they're like a hand wired Morgan. They're unbelievable. And that's now, I mean, ever since then, I found that tone, and then I've messed with different pedals and guitars in front of it, and that's what I've been doing over the past couple months. A little bit is manipulating with that, trying to figure out what that sounds like. And
is tube essentially very important to you in your guitar sound?
Yeah, I can't get on board with the digital stuff. It doesn't feel the same to me, and people say that I'm crazy. But it's like the difference between like hydraulic and electric steering in a car.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm right there with you. Although I will tell you, digital has come so far in the last 30 years.
Synergy amps would be something I'd get on board with. Have you heard about them?
I have not.
So there's a preamp, a full tube preamp, and then there's modules that you get. They're like the front of the amp.
Well, we had something like that at Randall back like in the
early
2000s, the MTS series or
yeah,
something?
and Egnator did it for a while, too.
Egnator did it for Randall. Egnator got bought out by U.S. Music back when we were doing this. I didn't do much with amps, but we saw them. There was 2 preamp modules, and some artists had signature ones, and it didn't last long.
And
4 or 5
they
years.
weren't bad, but Synergy found a way to literally copy a Dumble.
Yeah.
And copy a Morgan AC40. And you can have like a rack with all of these different amps in it, and then it runs into your preamp and your cab, and it's still all tube.
And you've had time to play around with this?
Yeah, at Summer NAMM. Yeah, right before I picked up my Bourgeois, that's where at Summer NAMM a couple years ago. My buddy Jeff is big at Harman, and he's always like, hey, dude, you got to check this out. You got to check that out, you know, and that's where I get, you know, my fiance probably is like, oh, shit. Jeff's calling again with a gearhead drop, you know. And
guitar players, man, that's like, it's such a beautiful instrument, such a beautiful thing to add to your life, but don't think for a second it comes cheap, because it doesn't.
It does not. I mean, and I've been lucky to where the things that I buy pay for themselves, but like, it's still, I mean, there's equipment I'm still paying off.
Well, there's some honesty here anyways. So talk to me about what's next here before we wrap up. Like you're coming out of, I believe we're going to come out of COVID here. Again, I'm the optimist in the group. I get it, but I really think that we're not going to forget about it, and we may be wearing masks longer than we should. We're totally wrong phrase. We're going to wear masks longer than we probably will ultimately need to, because there will be a portion of the population who will still be worried, even after all the relative science tells us we're in the clear as we can be. So I think it's going to happen. But when do you think that's going to happen, if you agree? And when it does, what's the environment going to look like for you? What are your plans?
I don't know when it's going to happen. I'm just trying to be the most ready.
Are you optimistic about it or not?
I'm optimistic about it in the fact that I believe when this is over, we're going to be better off than we were. And I think we're going to have more perspectives. And I think that...
Agreed.
I think the silent majority is learning a lot about the reality that we live in and the things that have been manipulated and hid from us and so on and so forth.
Right.
And I think that those people make up the most of the population anyway. I mean, most people are good. You know, we've talked about that before too.
No question.
So I think on the other side of this, we're going to have, I mean, even now when I go places, people are a lot nicer, a lot more open, a lot more helpful, you know.
Yeah.
I think they're a lot more likely to reach out to their neighbor. So I'm hopeful for that. I don't understand the science of this. I don't understand the polarization and the politicized version of this as well, because it's so hard to understand that this has definitely been politicized, over-politicized, but it's also super dangerous. And you can clearly see, if you have any ability to critical think, that it's been manipulated by both sides to toe party lines and agendas. So that's why I don't know how long it will go. You know, I don't know if a vaccine's the answer. I don't know if herd immunity is the answer. There's a lot of things that play into that. So, and masks help to an extent. And I don't know. That's a mixed bag too. So I don't know about the timeline. But my thing is, coming out the other side of this, I want to be more organized. You know what I mean? I want to be more prepared. We're working. I'm not going to just take gigs anymore. I'm not going to do that. I did that for so long.
Right.
And I think it's important for everyone to do. But I think you'll know when you hit a threshold of it's time for me to be picky about where and when I play and who I'm playing for, to make sure that I'm not devaluing myself or the band or the business. We're going to try to go build an investment deal together to help get some push behind this thing. Right. And continue to talk to some labels and see what happens there. But I'm fine with pushing forward independently, whether that be with an investment deal or, just without it. That's kind of where we're headed, is building multiple different plans for multiple different situations that we may or may not end up in,
Understood.
But being prepared for trucking along like we did,
Yeah, right on.
Just booking. But I think I'm going to book more tours rather than just trying to book as many shows as possible at who will take them at our rate. I think
you did a lot of that for the first 5 years of your life.
Yeah, for 5 years I told myself, it was 17 to 22, or 18 to 23, actually, where I said, you can't turn down a gig. As long as you can financially afford to get there, you can't turn down a gig. And that became like a reflex almost. I knew when it was over. I knew when I had fulfilled the contract with myself, but afterward, it was almost like I forced myself to do things I didn't want to do for a long time.
Sure, sounds like it.
But it made me sharp, it made me now, like, I've had 6 months off. We were at a friend's party yesterday, and I picked up a guitar, and I hadn't played in a few weeks, and it was there.
Of course it's there.
Of
course it's there.
But if I wouldn't have done that, you know what I mean? The playing live thing is so hard. I can't explain to people how difficult it is. Even now, it's still hard to me. And to be good at that, the only way to do it is repetition and seat time.
You got to do it. Now, in Pennsylvania, as we're recording this at the end of July, can you do acoustic gigs now? I mean, is there social distancing?
Not in PA anymore, really, because the problem is, even though they would probably allow it in certain places, one, you're only allowed to come in and eat and leave, and you're only allowed to run at 25% capacity.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get the gigs that keep my lights on.
Yeah, right on.
You know what I mean? And also, too, like, I'm really getting to play 5 songs per person. They're not staying for the whole show. They can't stay for the whole show. They're not legally allowed to stay for the whole show. They're also not... They can't have social lubricant like vodka, which helps people kind of... Not that I'm justifying drinking or not drinking, but there is an element to that is important.
Well, it's very relaxed. I mean, I think people go out to relax, too.
Yeah.
And then some people, they use alcohol to relax in social settings, especially if they want to enjoy music on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I got two or three shows in the beginning of July before the surge came back. I really enjoyed it. The crowds were great. They were really great. But that was botched pretty quick. It was short-lived.
I'm sure.
Frustrating, too. But, we'll get back at it.
Better days ahead, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Come back and see me for sure.
Absolutely,
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It's very informative for me, too. And thanks for being so frank and honest. And I thoroughly enjoy my musician guests because they have no problem giving me their opinion and going off the reservation. And I think that's good. I think that's the juice of this show is this long-form conversation, and it's not specific to any particular subject matter. So
I love it, man. Thanks for what you do here, man. It's a big deal to me, and I know you've helped a lot of people.
Well, I'm trying. We're going to do a lot more of it. Just definitely come back and see me for sure.
Hey, dude, you let me know. I'll be here. I don't have anything to do right now. So.
Fair enough. Friends, we are out.